in this House to speak on behalf of the fine people of Toronto Centre. Today we're debating the Fall Economic Statement 2024. I want to start with a saying, that one that we've all used in this House, and certainly one that I have heard throughout my public life in every single chamber of government, and that is, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. And this is a statement that rings true ever so more today in Ontario, especially as people are struggling with the high cost of living, the high cost of housing and rent, the high cost of fuel, and their dollars, their paychecks are ever so shrinking with the rate of inflation. Ontarians are not getting what they pay for in this fall economic statement, and that continues to be true. Disappointing spending decisions that will deliver fewer services to Ontarians. People in Ontario deserve a government that puts their tax dollars to work by spending it responsibly to make life easier and more affordable. Ontario became a have-not province in 2023. In 2024, Justin Trudeau's government is sending this province, a have-not province now, a check of $576 million. This is a shameful record by all accounts, the powerful economic engine of this country. The Premier likes to stand up to boast about how things are better today than they were almost 7 years ago when they took over from the Liberals, but the record is there. The math does not lie. And this budget is also showing us that we have a $6.6 billion deficit. Further into the details of this mini budget, we recognize that the government has $41.8 billion in long-term borrowing on their books. This is $14 billion higher than it was in 2023. And the cost to carry the debt service alone in this year and into the next is $13.9 billion. Just let that settle in interest payments. $13.9 billion is how much the government is paying to borrow the money, which they are now giving away. And I will get to that further. Ontario receiving equalization payments is nothing to boast about. These financial transfers from the federal government is simply letting us know that we have lower capacity with respect to economic output. These payments are not expected to go away, but expected to rise again in the following year. Ontarians deserve a government that will actually get to the basics and do them well. The basics that any Ontarian expects from a provincial government is the delivery, high-quality delivery of public housing, health care, education, long-term care, and other type of services. On this side of the bench, New Democrats understand that responsibly well. We have put forward solutions to hire more doctors and take the cost of administration off of their books so that they can do more of the patient-first medicine delivery. We have put forward solutions to fix the schools that are now sitting with a $16 billion capital backlog, and instead of addressing that horrible state of condition, the government is choosing to let it crumble. Life in Ontario has become far more expensive than it ever has been. It is the scar of this government, and that will be a significant legacy. The budget is out of touch with people, everyday people, who are looking for real solutions to the public service crisis that we see. And because I'm the official opposition critic on justice and the Attorney General, I want to start my comments about what we're seeing in the justice file. It is hard for everyone to understand, especially for those who claim to support access to justice, for a government to constantly boast about being tough on crime, to see them act so irresponsibly once more by not addressing the long and extraordinary record high Canada number one first in place backlogs in the courts and the tribunal and administrative agency sectors. We are seeing a $500 million cut in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Justice. We are seeing this government implement a 9% cut in the justice file. It is reprehensible and difficult to understand how this government has chosen to ignore victims and survivors who've come before this House and at committee to talk about the heartbreaking wait time that they've experienced, only to see their cases thrown out. How is it possible that our courts are already shockingly underfunded and you are now choosing to make that cut even deeper? Every single day, we are seeing the chaos in the courts, and cases are being thrown out. You have heard from the legal stakeholders. You have heard from victims and survivors. You have heard from the justices themselves, and you have chosen to ignore all their advice. Government members are familiar with the Jordan decision, which states that cases must be tried within 18 months of charges being laid. And if that timeline expires, somebody walks. And that is regardless of whether or not they're innocent or guilty. They all walk. So while the government beats their chest and writes letters, points their finger to the Ottawa government and says, you know, fix bail reform, when you have a responsibility right here, which you choose to neglect day in and day out. Dangerous people who are repeat offenders are being released into our communities, and they are being released into our communities with zero consequence. When this government talks about public safety and you cut $500 million from the justice file, there is no public safety when you can't get to trial. Kate Alexander's story, you know all too well, is heartbreaking. Emily Agar and dozens more. You are failing Ontarians when it comes to public and community safety. The record is there for all of us to see, regardless of the press statements or how many pictures you choose to take with police officers. Communities do not feel safer when you don't invest in the justice system. We are hearing from the Crown Attorneys Association, who rang the bell on intimate partner violence during the hearings. Courtrooms are triple booked. Survivors are emotionally preparing themselves for trial, which then never happens. And what is worse is when a trial begins, the testimony has started, witnesses have been called to provide their statement, and then the trial is canceled because the clock has run. How dare you cut $500 million from the justice file? How dare you continue to defund the justice system? It is absolutely shameful. There are so many people who are watching what happens in our courts. There is no safety when you cannot get to trial. If a case closes and the judge is not able to hear the case, those who've been charged with the crime walks. It is also a colossal waste of time and money that is spent. This is not fiscally responsible, nor is it fiscally sustainable. We cannot have a justice system that runs on an ad hoc, when we feel like it, when we're going to deliver policies by press statements. You're setting every single person up for failure, including the Crown and Justice. And it's not fair that they wear it, because it's not their fault. The police have done their work, they've done their investigations, they've laid their charges, they're prepared to go, and again, the trial doesn't take place. When will you understand that by defunding the courts, you are making things worse? What would it take? How many more victims and survivors have to fill this chamber for you to understand that you are not helping the situation? You've made it worse in all your almost 7 years in government. There is absolutely no rationale whatsoever to see a $500 million defunding of the justice system. There's no rationale for that 9% cut. The detention centers, incarceration, jails are full. And as you talk about locking people up, there's 3 to a cell. Where are you going to put them? I'm going to move on, Speaker, to talk about healthcare and the challenges that we are seeing in healthcare. And although the government is showing an additional $1 billion of healthcare spending, it's actually to reimburse the healthcare workers for the wages that were stolen through Bill 124. We are not going to see an expansion of services. We're not going to see a reduction in wait time for surgeries, and we're not going to see more family physicians for the 2.5 million Ontarians who are waiting, soon to be 4 million Ontarians who will be waiting in the next few years. We're not going to see more nurses either. The crisis in the healthcare system is so significant, Speaker. We know that this government came to power promising to end hallway medicine, but instead what they're doing is closing emergency rooms. Emergency rooms. Women who need to deliver their babies have to drive 8 hours in northern and remote communities. This is not the Ontario that you are describing in your partisan paid, in your publicly funded advertising on Facebook and other social media platforms. That is the Ontario, the true Ontario that you have created, and it's absolutely shameful. I think, Speaker, we need to invest in healthcare. We need to invest in mental health care. We need to build up and stitch together that social safety net that has been ripped, absolutely torn apart into pieces. People are falling through the cracks in Ontario, and it's getting significantly worse. Ontarians deserve an apology from this government for failing them so miserably. The wait lists are simply too long. We're seeing more and more people being diagnosed a lot later with serious illness and cancer. This is an issue that affects every single family. There isn't a single family in Ontario who's not struggling with the healthcare system. And if you're lucky enough to have a family doctor, you better pray that this person is young enough to grow with you and your family, because I know that the statistics are also going to show us, as the OMA has told us, is that there is going to be a number of doctors retiring, and they are not going to be replaced in equal proportionate numbers. Speaker, it's time to talk about housing. This is an issue that affects every single community. Ontarians deserve a home that is safe, that is in the communities that they want to live in, that is connected to the proper, well-maintained roads and highways, that is connected in urban centers to public transportation that will allow them to get from A to B in a timely fashion. Speaker, this is one of the most important issues of our time, and we have a responsibility to get it right. The challenges that the housing starts under this government have been increasingly coming down. The numbers are going in the opposite direction. The annual goal of hitting 125 housing starts is not being met. It's not being met. It's never been met. And this year, the housing starts have fallen once again to 81,300. Every single land economist, every single developer, every single urban land institute or akin to, every single editorial newspaper is saying the government is not going to meet its goal of 1.5 million homes in 2031. And I'm very sad to point out this record. I'm incredibly sad, because families are struggling with being either underhoused, 2 generations living together in small apartments and small homes, young people delaying the start of their adult life and independent living because they can't get out, seniors who are facing higher and higher costs of living and feeling that the belt is just tightening around their waist but also around their neck. We are seeing more people choosing MAID because they just don't have hope. And just this weekend, I know there was a constituent in my own community who invited everyone to a party, but it wasn't really a party, Speaker. She wanted to say goodbye to community members and family because she has chosen MAID. Not because she's terminally ill or in chronic pain, Speaker. It's because she cannot subsist on the $1,308 from ODSP. And we know that rents in Toronto and right across Ontario are high, but the rents here in this city, the most expensive city in Canada, a one-bedroom apartment will set you back. A one-bedroom apartment will almost set you back close to $3,000. There's really nothing left. The solutions are there. You've chosen to ignore your own affordability housing task force. The opposition, Ontario NDP, has put forward numerous proposals on how to accelerate the provision and the building of housing, whether it's building more fourplexes on the main lines, building up our transit-oriented communities, ensuring that the incentives are there to work with our public and private partners so that everyone can get shovels into the ground. We have put all of that forward and more. And we're the only party, Speaker, that's committed to fully getting back into the public housing game, because governments have a responsibility to build affordable housing, whether it's supportive housing with the wraparound supports that should be healthcare-based and funded by the provincial government, which this government is not doing, or if it's working with options to home by releasing and making available public lands for public good, or building cooperative housing by ensuring that the financing and mortgage structure is there. All of that requires every order of government to come together. And what we hear from the federal government and the municipal governments is that province of Ontario is constantly missing, or when they do arrive, it's late, and when they do arrive, they're $1 short. We have 1,400 encampments in Ontario, and that is a very conservative number. They're in every single community, Speaker. Homeless individuals who don't have a place to go, who are sleeping rough, and winter is coming. This is not a joke. It is coming. The unofficial numbers, according to the government's own document, on homelessness in Ontario is over 234,000, Speaker. Let me just repeat that. That's more than 250,000 people in Ontario who are unhoused. And so the crisis before our doorstep is real. And with the Premier saying that if only municipalities just asked for help, he would respond. The shameful thing about this, Speaker, is that the Premier is choosing to tell certain truths. The truth is, Ontario's Big Mayor Caucus has put forward not just one letter, but multiple letters.
I just want to interrupt the member, and let's frame that certain truths. It's pretty much attend to the word you're not supposed to say, so let's clean that up.
We want every politician, thank you, Speaker, thank you. We want every politician in this House to be truthful, to look at the statistics and then to rise to respond to them. We have a homelessness crisis that is absolutely unaddressed in this mini budget. We have a Premier who is saying to municipalities, and that he's actually gaslighting them, Speaker, by saying, ask me for help and I will help you. Write me a letter. Well, I'll tell you what, the Ontario Big Mayor's Caucus, Speaker, wrote the Premier a letter in 2002 before the last provincial election, and the Premier
I don't want
chose
to interrupt the member again, but we know what gaslighting means.
Withdraw. Thank you. Speaker, there's so much about this budget that I think Ontarians need to see more from. And at this time, when I consider the power of the moment and the opportunity that's before us when a government of the great province of Ontario tables a budget, it should meet the moment. And Speaker, regrettably, By all accounts, from every single major newspaper, every single economist, this government has failed to meet that moment. Thank you.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This province is on its way in the right direction towards a balanced budget. And I want to share with the House a quote from George Smitherman, who is the former Liberal Minister of Health. And Mr. Smitherman said that the previous Liberal government had indeed balanced the budget, but this is how they got there. And I quote, "To get to that balanced budget, the Ontario Liberals really starved health care for 5 years, and that is not spoken enough." That's what the Liberal Health Minister said about his own government. So my question to the honourable member across the way is it about time that we start speaking about that more?
Response, the member from Toronto Centre.
Thank you very much to the member from Essex. I couldn't agree with you more, sir. I do believe that we should be raising the attention to the horrible, horrible record of the Liberal government. They created hallway medicine. They deepened the crisis in Ontario. They drove away nurses. They did not plan for the future with the adequate number of doctors. But now, things are significantly worse because you have followed an exact page from Mr. George Smitherman, and you're doing exactly the same thing.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Spadina, Fort York.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank the member from Toronto Centre for her comments today. And there's so many good points that were made, but the one that stuck with me is she was talking about MAID. And on Friday night, I had a conversation with a friend who has a disability and had applied for MAID because they were in chronic pain, and they were also about to be evicted from their home. And they just said, "I can't be homeless again." Fortunately, there was an intervention, and that person was saved. On Saturday night, I attended a celebration of life for somebody who's actually applied for MAID this coming week. And somebody that you know and that you just mentioned. And you're saying that they also cannot survive on the ODSP that this government gives, which, you know, the housing allowance is $582 a month. Can you just tell the government that their policies, their ODSP policies, are actually leading people to take MAID, and how unconscionable those are?
Response, the member from Toronto Centre.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I believe that there are a combination of 27,000 people in Ontario on some type of government assistance, some receiving $730 a month on OW and $1,308 on ODSP. I also know that there are over 100,000 multimillionaires in Toronto who do not need a $200 rebate. If you really want to see this budget work and show compassion to those who need it the most, this rebate should meet a litmus test. And I can't imagine people more worthy and deserving of that $200 than those who are trying to survive on OW and ODSP.
Further questions? Further questions? I recognize the member from Hamilton and Castor Dundas.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the member from Toronto Centre for raising the issue that this budget fails people, but it's failed women more than any other group. The fact that we've come in this House with victims and survivors to say to this government, you are failing us. Sexual assault perpetrators are walking free in this province because of the underfunding of our justice system. We have asked the government time and time again to declare gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic, as has been declared by almost every province, every municipality in Ontario. But this government steadfastly refuses to declare this an epidemic. So,
question?
Would you agree with me that this government seems blind to the conditions that women and sexual assault survivors are facing in this province?
Response, the member from Toronto Centre.
Yes, to the wonderful member from Hamilton, thank you very much for your question. It is with a heavy heart that I see this government continue to fail on the issue of addressing gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. We know it's an epidemic. It's been declared by over 100 municipalities. We hear from AMO asking this government to do more to end gender-based violence. We're hearing from the OPP. We heard from various police chiefs. Please do more. This government has chosen not to. On November 25th, you'll all be wearing scarves. Madam Speaker, we are all coming in to wear some purple scarves. It would be good on that day for us to come together as a House before you put on your purple scarves to declare IPV an epidemic in this province of Ontario.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Burlington.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for their comments and remarks this afternoon. I heard you mention affordability a couple of times during your speech, and so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the cuts that we're extending on the gas tax and fuel to save Ontario families about $380 a year that will help families, Ontarians, and businesses in the province. So just through you, Speaker, I asked the member opposite, will they support our government as we make life more affordable for Ontario people and businesses here?
Response, the member from Toronto Centre.
Thank you very much to the wonderful member from Burlington. I deeply appreciate your question. The temporary reduction in the gas tax that is renewed constantly every 6 months is simply an opportunity for the government to get in front of the cameras once again to remind everybody that they've temporarily reduced the gas tax. If you really want to help Ontarians, I'd say you would actually you go one step further. Why not eliminate the small business tax? Why not go further and reduce the tax burden on low-income families? Why not support the budget by taxing the very rich like Yale and Weston, tax the billionaires, tax the multimillionaires? You can actually do something right now that will help everybody who is struggling in Ontario, and that is to bring back real rent control. Thank you.
Further questions? Further questions? I recognize the member from Sudbury.
My speaker, thank you as well to the member from Toronto Centre. She talked a lot about a lot of great points, and she started off by saying, show me your budget, I'll show you your values. We've heard many times from the Conservatives about how much money they're saving for workers, but the thing that stands out to me all the time is that every year, more and more working people are accessing food banks on a regular basis. Why is there this disconnect, thinking from the Conservative government that they're helping working people if more and more working people are using food banks every single year since they've been elected?
Response, the member from Toronto Centre.
Thank you very much to the member from Sudbury. The reality is that this check is a symbolic gesture. It is not litmus and needs-based. It actually doesn't make sense when you're throwing out money across the province, including for those who sit in, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million mansions. And the fact that it's such a blunt instrument, it actually doesn't make sense. Food banks use is on the rise across Ontario, and you are not being surgical, you're not being intentional, and you're not being purposeful in how to target the support to those who need it most. And I'll tell you that every single food bank operator in Ontario would love to see this government and step up to actually support them, as opposed to telling the farmers when they're here to donate more to food banks.
Quick question, quick response. I recognize the member from Milton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the member opposite from Toronto Centre. Speaker, given where I sit, I hear countless times the members from in opposition talking about doctor shortage. Well, I also heard the members say, show me a budget and I'll show you the values. Our government is expanding the Learn and Stay grant to provide more doctors in more communities, right out of medical school, and we're encouraging more Ontarians to stay and study right here at home. It's the popular guy sometimes. So through you, Speaker, I asked the member, are they going to stop saying no to every healthcare measure we propose, or are they going to vote for this fall economic statement and ensure that more family doctors for families right here in Ontario, for families that need them?
Quick response, member from Toronto Centre.
Thank you very much, and thank you to them, a wonderful member. It is my intention to support the initiatives that actually support the people who need it most. Speaker, we do have a healthcare crisis in Ontario, and after 6-7 years now of conservative government policy decision makings, and I would say failed health policies, things have gotten significantly worse. There's not a single healthcare provider in Ontario who doesn't point at this government and say, this is them, they made this worse. They started the problem, the Liberals, but they actually broke it now permanently.
Further debate?